Welcome to Off Panel. Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Off Panel. I'm your host, David Harper, and this week our guest probably needs no introduction, but he's getting one anyways because it'd be weird not to give one. He's the writer of Darth Vader at Marvel, Mercury Heat and Modded at Avatar, and The Wicked and Divine at Image. It's Kieron Gillen. Thanks for coming on the show, Kieron.
Hello. Thanks very much for having me.
So I want to focus mostly on Wicked and Divine today, but I have to ask, because I was actually catching up on it just because I felt like I should probably read everything you're up to. Are you ever writing Darth Vader and just thinking, this is crazy, I'm actually getting paid to write Darth Vader comics?
What's the word? Yes, it's one of these kind of weird level of... You have these moments of clarity as a comic creator, like especially since I've been doing it for a while. Mm-hmm. I kind of go, oh wow, I get paid for this. Mm-hmm. And it's like, I had one on Friday when I was just looking at art that just arrived, and I find the idea of I write things and artists draw them, and so much obvious talent and skill gets laboured into it, and it's based off my stuff. That doesn't make sense. That's not a thing that anything happens. With Darth Vader, yeah, honestly, it's astounding and it's so much fun. And that's the surprising thing. I was expecting it to be more work than it is. And, obviously it's work and it's hard, but I was expecting it to be actually really hard work. Like anything with a major corporation or, with a major IP and all that kind of thing. That's always going to be a lot. But, it's been less work than I thought it would be. And some of the stuff they've let them get away with is astounding. I mean, I said this early on, about Vader, that, the first movie I saw in the cinema was Empire.
Oh, really?
So, yeah. So my first image of evil on the big screen was Darth Vader, and essentially entering into geek fandom. You know what I mean? As I'm literally in a kind of like, if it's a Grant Morrison comic, it's this entire circular structure we've got going on here. So part of me thinks I should be more weirded out by it than I am. But I've actually, maybe in 2 years I'll have a complete nervous breakdown over it. But at the moment I'm just laughing.
Yeah, I mean, and that's one of the things that when reading the comic, you read about like. Was it BT, and then you have like 000 and everything like that. Like you have these droids who are just like hardcore evil versions of the characters we know over in like the main universe or like the main story thread. And I think about it and I'm like, I can't believe he's getting away with it. It kind of seems like, what, relative to what some people would expect, you have Marvel and you have, Lucas films or Disney overseeing everything. You would think that it might be a little bit more oversight, but it kind of seems like you have flexibility there. Even, you probably can't get away with everything. You can't just kill Lando Calrissian or something like that. But it seems like it's pretty flexible, compared to what people might expect.
I mean, in issue 25, we're going to reveal that Afra kills Darth Vader, and she's been impersonating Darth Vader for the rest of the trilogy. No, as you say, there's when we kind of started this, it was always the original pictures we sent in. We did not self-censor, and we asked for stuff we thought we would never ever get, and that was kind of the point. And the point was kind of like not, if you self-censor, it's better for asking them say no than not ask to something they may have said yes to.
Yeah.
So it was a lot of kind of like navigating the boundaries of the relationship. And can we do this, and this? And it's like, no, we can't do this. But the fact that we say what we'd like to do gives us sort of suggestions of where we could go with stuff. So yeah, that's kind of the joy of it. We've got away with all manner of stuff.
Yeah.
And I've got to, I got to write some genuinely. It's about Vader, and this is what attracted me to the job. In that you've got some genuinely meaty stuff to do. It's not like scribbling the margins. There's a natural implied character arc between the two movies, and there's a really big meaty. Darth Vader realised in the last 20 years of his life has been a lie. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's not exactly like that. That's not small scale. So that's kind of the joy. It's like, I think when the whole thing's done, it'll be like 5 trades. There's this big solid novel. In that way, so yeah, we've just literally wrapped up the final issue like a couple of days ago. Actually, I'm not quite. No, it hasn't. It's got to go through the approval system. But the final coloured pages, which went through, and we're all in that kind of backslapping and oh man, we did it, guys, sort of mode. So we're all very happy at the moment.
That is amazing.
It is. It's a weird job,
It is a weird job, and like one of the things I actually want to talk to you about is it's a thing that I reference semi often in my writing and on this show actually, and it's going to harken back to the ye olden days of your work blog, 2010, the and you probably remember it fairly well, the Gillen McKelvie paradigm.
Yes.
Anyways, it's the idea of critics treating teams like you and Jamie, and beyond that, like Matt and Clayton, as faux cartoonists. Like, you know, you guys are like a Voltron of awesomeness of creating comics. Spread the credit and blame to everyone as equals, because it's hard for everyone. You know, it's hard for me as like somebody, let's say I'm writing a review of Wicked Divine number 22. It's hard for me to discern exactly, you know, who's defining which story beat. Is that Jamie working off of your script? Is that you baking something very specific into it? Things like that. But it's something I think about a lot. But I know you wrote in there that you wrote the whole post with a bit of a smirk on your face. Do you think, looking back, do you think the faux cartoonist idea was and is accurate, or no?
I think it's a useful paradigm to looking at work. I think even if you don't credit in your reviews, you know what I mean? I think if I was working as a critic, I'd be using it a lot more. I wouldn't necessarily make it something explicit, but it's something that's when I'm looking at the work. You know, I'd be trying to actually work the effect rather than actually trying to guess at the unknowables. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's kind of. I think it's more like there's definitely things I've written. Like when I was a game journalist, the same. I wrote things which weren't meant to be read by the readers. They weren't meant to ever be really used, but they were meant to be part of the internal dialogue, essentially the background reading. So yeah, that's kind of how I looked at it, and it's a useful way of putting. I mean, my main problem with it now is actually the fact it doesn't go far enough. You know, it's the Gillen McKelvie hypothesis. It's not the Gillen McKelvie Wilson hypothesis. And even then, it's like I feel bad that, you know, Clayton's not in there. You know, I feel that, you know, Chrissy, our editor, I've just been arguing over one line in the Wicked Divine special with her, and I've been shouting back and forth. Like, I want to have a reference to She Who Walks Without Beauty. Sorry, She Who Walks With Beauty, the Byron poem. But what I've written in the script is pretty fucking clunky. And it's that kind of like, how can we get this in, and how can we turn this around, and you know what I mean? And that single line is being interrogated, and you can't really unpack Chrissy's influence from that. So, you know, there's a reason why. Me and Jamie's kind of big thing is trying to. The fact that WicDiv is entirely ours, we get to run it how we feel like. So, you know, we credit flatters. You know, not many people in this industry credits their flatter, and we do. You know, and that's not like, but that's just that kind of like, we want to try to make the industry more in our own image. In that kind of, you know, WicDiv's a hit book. We have a level of cultural cachet. And that's kind of when you're in that position, you know, you've got to use it to try to change things for the better. Well, that's my personal take. I mean, I kind of say I don't believe that artists have any responsibility, but I do think artists have opportunity. So if your mission, if that's what you want to do with the world, I think, you know, taking the opportunity is a good and useful thing to do. My God, I'm in a self-virtuous mode today. I'm sorry.
I love it.
It's like, God, no, I hate it now. It's like I hate blowing my own trumpet in that way. But, you know, what we do is the bare minimum. You know, we try to but we do aware we have a level of freedom, and we try to use it.
Well, one thing I really like about your guys' credits is the fact that, like, you know, a person whose work continues to have an impact that is no longer with the book, I don't think, is Hannah Donovan. And you guys credit her as original designer, and even though Sergio Serrano is now the designer, I love that you guys have kind of like a legacy thing in there, because, you know, her impact is shown on the front cover every single month, right?
Yeah, you know, and all the very intense dialogue between Hannah and Jamie, which went in there, you know, and it's like Sergio is very much working in Hannah's style. You know, and the immaterial style aspect of WicDiv is so important. There's the kind of does it feel like WicDiv is such a big thing to the book? And, you know, Hannah's part of that is, you know, in the same way, if I was running Marvel, I would, you know, credit Jamie as character designer, you know, costume designer on the characters he's designed, you know?
Right. Yeah.
You know, give credit where it's due.
Absolutely. And actually, that's one thing I think is interesting is, like, you look back at 2010 and you look at when you originally wrote the Gillen McKelvie paradigm, and like you said, it expands, you know, to like Matt and to the Clayton and everybody like that. But it's not just, you know, at the time it felt like mostly a creator-owned type thing, but you look at, you know, like, look at a lot of books at Marvel today. Like, you know, if it was Kate Leth with anybody besides Brittany Williams on Patsy Walker, aka Hellcat, would that book be the same? Probably not. Or like, if Will Moss wasn't editing that book, would it be the same? Probably not. And it's interesting how it's like, I kind of feel like in a weird way, the dominance, or not dominance, but the expanded impact of creator-owned these days has kind of started to impact Marvel and DC books in some ways, and like in some subtle ways, like that the faux cartoonist is more like prevalent than we probably realize. Like, I write a review of like Spider-Woman by Dennis Hopeless and Javier Rodriguez, and like, it's hard for me to know the impact Javier Rodriguez has on that book until I interview him, and I'm like, wow, those pages would not look remotely the same with any other artist. It's very fascinating.
I mean, it's always, I mean, it's not even I'm always interested in the not good ways. I mean, I just like, there's been like, when we're doing Young Avengers, we said we're going to try to write it like we own it. That was a kind of our go-to aspect. And there's quite a lot of write it like you own it books in the last like 5 years in the kind of like big two. You know, like so like Hawkeye. You know, Hawkeye would be the kind of year one for that. I think. I mean, you know, arguably Daredevil, but I think Hawkeye kind of took it further. Not as in took it further into the quasi-creator-owned space. You know, Daredevil was, I say merely, and I don't really mean it like that, Daredevil was just this completely brilliant rejuvenation of what, you know, a superhero comic was, whilst Hawkeye was this kind of liminal book, that, you know, this, it kind of bulged out the idea of what was currently happening in the mainstream. And there's a lot, you know, and post that, there's been a lot of those kind of books. As you say, you mentioned, obviously, Hellcats, yes, but you know, the Squirrel Girl will be another obvious example. You know, Batgirl will be another obvious example. Yeah, I would include Superior Phase of Spider-Man, and of course, if they're telling things about those books, they cross over very well into these people doing their own creator-owned books. Yeah. So this is all sort of fascinating. And the other side of that sort of stuff is when it doesn't work. You know what I mean? It's like here's an example. Occasionally, like when you work with an artist, it just doesn't click. Even if they're really great, and you know, just sometimes two people's aesthetics don't line up. But even then, you don't. I mean, I always remember there's that one artist I really like. I'm not naming it because I don't like. You know, I don't never.
You don't throw shade. Oh
yeah, exactly. It's not. This isn't a major problem. It's just style. And they always they acted more. My characters tend to be very like stoic and minimalistic, and they don't act much. And they always their characters moved around their arms a lot more. You know, they made big dramatic poses like in the Kirby style. And I of course when at script stage I always overwrite the dialogue then. You know, I mean, as in because if they're doing these kind of terse little lines, it doesn't work. You know, they've got to be more emotional, and this is kind of the push and pull. And even at the absolute worst, it's like when storytelling falls apart at some point, because you know it's a busy medium, and then you've got to completely overwrite the dialogue to actually cover the story beat, otherwise the story falls apart. And it's that kind of like from the outside, if you're looking at that, do you think the writer's just incompetent? Yeah. Or, you know what I mean? Or maybe the writer was incompetent at the script stage, you know, and you can't assign blame either. You know what I mean? Anyway, that would be the flip of it.
Yeah, it's definitely a tricky thing, but one of the things I think is really amazing is like when you look at, I'm just going to call you guys this because it's fun to say it, faux cartoonist prime, you and Jamie. You know, I have to imagine it's a pretty free-flowing experience. I mean, you guys are friends in IRL, in real life. You guys like hang out. So you guys probably, like, it's not like you're just emailing or texting. You probably talk about stuff while you're just talking about other stuff. You know, and you have Matt and you have Clayton and you have everyone else. I'm curious, the further you get into your run and into your creative partnership, is there still a pretty consistent conversation back and forth on Wicked and Divine between all members of the team, or is it just kind of like you guys have your independent roles and you guys talk when necessary?
It's true. I think me and Jamie live in other sides of London, so we see each other relatively little in physical space because we're not allowed to talk because the London north-south divide is a very real thing. Actually, we do most of our stuff via texts or via. We recently, like about a few months ago now, we set up a Slack. So we've got a Slack running for like me, Jamie, Chrissy, and Katie West, who's Jamie's PA. Which kind of is for a lot of the actual main business running. And there's Jamie and Matt have a very intense relationship in terms of and like I'm not always part of those conversations. I rarely am, apart from the note stages. And a lot of stuff, like my scripts to Jamie, are always kind of conversational. And there's stuff that will come up, you know, because I won't. If I'm with Jamie, I'll say this happens in issue 72 or something. And you know, and I'll be trying, you know, and I send. So there's a communication on lots of different levels. And we do talk a lot about stuff. I mean, Jamie was like talking about Laura's new haircut for the next arc, you know, so that kind of thing, just earlier. But at the same time, there is some degree of people just left, you know, do their own thing. I mean, cover design especially, it's certainly changed from like early phonogram days. You know, now it's so much. I wouldn't say I quite sit back. Like, we talk about the themes of the issue, then Jamie cooks up with something because cover design is such a big part of WicDiv, and it is purely a visual thing. So in other words, it's more like Jamie will create the context and I will possibly suggest deconstructions for it. I mean, issue 11's missing head cover, you know, the decapitation shot, that would be an example as a thing. And then I immediately, it'd be really cool if we did a cover without a head, you know, this bleed, you know, that set, you know what I mean? So Jamie sets up the visual aesthetic and then I deconstruct it. That would be an example of how we work. But yeah, to be honest, we still talk a lot. Like any major decision, we'll probably text each other about. You know, my scripts are still like letters rather than scripts.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, it seems like it's kind of, you know, it's like you guys have teams. Like, you know, thinking about Jamie and Matt working together, that makes a lot of sense because, like, I'm sure Jamie and Matt, as independent artists, have like very strong feelings about how everything is going to work, and so trying to merge that into one unified whole is very important. Granted, they probably, I don't know, maybe they talk less the further in. I don't know. It's very interesting, but I love that you brought up that missing head cover, because I remember when I first saw that, like, I was horrified. I was just
it's horrible. It's really horrible.
yeah. But I mean, and that's one of the things I really love about Wicked and Divine as a whole, is the fact that everything feels so, you one of the things I was going to ask you about was is arc names, because the next arc is Imperial Phase Part 1, which I think, given how issue number 22 ended, I might be able to guess at what's going to come to play, but maybe not. But I love like the titles. Like, I thought the Faust Act was hilarious, but I love that it seems like you're both having fun, but they're also weirdly feel more important to the book than like arc titles in other books. Are those names, are things like the what you're going to do in covers and arc names, are those something you guys put a ton of stock into, or are they more, especially in the arc names part, something you're just having fun with?
There's definitely some degree of having fun, but the level of iconic content in the book is deliberate. In that kind of, obviously everything's deliberate, but kind of the idea that we're trying to make a mythology. So the idea we're going to try to so even from the stuff with the icons and the circles and the finger clicks and the head covers and all that, there's a lot of mimetically sticky elements. Even stuff like 90 years. I mean, there's a reason why I chose 90 years, because it's about human lifespan and stuff like that, because that's this cyclum is the technical term, and that's actually the time it takes for the human race to regenerate. So in other words, if you're talking about what a real generation is, the cyclum, the 90 years is a good idea. So that's a good justification. But the original reason was 100 years is what everyone uses. As a what I mean? It was really basic in terms of, like, if we want to make our own mythology, which is kind of sticky, we have to choose something no one else uses. Yeah. And it's like the stuff like the core myth, like you're a normal person, then an anchor arrives and does this routine. The ritual of it all is so much a big part of the book. And the arcs would be a good example of that. The idea of we want something that feels like us, and and also not really, not overtly reliant on other media. I mean, when I came into comics, I had a few rules for myself, and I've bent some of them ever since. But one of them, and the really shallow one, I would never use outside of phonogram. I would never use a song title as a story title.
That is a good rule set for yourself, given how music inspired you are. Yeah.
I mean, partly because I'm not really judging the writers who do this, because most of them are my friends, but it's such a common thing for kind of the cooler side of comic writers to use a horrible phrase. They use this kind of derivative form of naming. The idea of, like, okay, I'm going to use this title, and it's actually a reference to something else, and that's it showing my cultural literacy. And that's also, for me, it felt like dead end postmodernism bullshit. The idea that no, we have to make our new myths. We have to try to find something that's as inspiring as this phrase. And I mean, I was in a really crappy way. Halo, the first ever Halo, when I was a games critic. Not the last level, but when they realised that when they realised the whole thing's a weapon and it's going to blow something up, you have these titles pop up all the way through, and the title was I'm going to mess it up now. It was the gun aimed at the gun aimed at the head of the universe, or the gun at the aimed at the universe's forehead, or something like that, and it was instantly evocative, and it was like, okay, here's an image, and they've just dropped that, and that's like ballsy, and that's what we're trying to do in our own style. So yes, they're quite pun based. But
I really hope that somebody just had Halo spoiled for them. They're like, no, I'm almost to that level, and now I know.
I don't. Plus, I did actually avoid the major spoiler. So I mean, the Faust Act weirdly was Jamie, in terms of, like, it had actually had a much worse title of it. I think it was Sympathy for You Know Who was the working title of the first arc. Then Jamie suggested we should do a Faust pun.
Yeah.
And I came up with the Faust Act, of course, the pun on the first act. You'll be surprised how many people miss that's actually a pun.
Oh, really?
I've had, like, quite big WicDiv fans come up to me and go, I've just realised, you fucker. But, as in the covers as well for the trades. I mean, Jamie really wanted I was quite reticent. I kind of thought it was quite strange that we've got one of the greatest facial artists currently working in comics, and we're going to have just a covers of objects. And I was like, are you sure, Jamie? But no, it's ended up being such a big part of the book. Phantomonium was, an obvious, like, a very playful pun. Commercial suicide is both, the meta statement. Oh yeah, this could that arc could have generally have ended the book.
That was one of the most amazing things I thought about the entire book was, and I could easily go in two different directions here, but I want to talk about commercial suicide because one of the things I really like about the book is you guys I mean, honestly, I think you guys, and I'm not saying you should do this, but you could easily roll out new issues of the gods doing the things that the gods want to do, just partying and having concerts and everything like that. And I think people would enjoy it because they love your work and you guys would probably do great things with that. But you guys take risks. I really love that about the book. And like, with the commercial suicide, you guys took a risk by taking the entire art team besides Clayton off the book for the entire arc and had people like Tula Lotay, Stephanie Hans, Brandon Graham on the book. And it also had the first remix issue I've ever seen, which I thought was amazing, which was perfect for Woden. But then you also have like the 1831 one shot coming up where it's going to take a break and you're going to have an issue drawn by Stephanie Hans. And then whatever exactly is going to be happening with number 23 where Kevin Wada is tagging in. So I guess one of my questions I had is it important for you guys to not just play back the hits, but to keep pushing the story in interesting and challenging ways?
It's kind of like, yeah, I mean, would be the short answer. The slightly longer answer, I'm sure you're going to get. It's like, I said earlier, we could do things however we want. Mm-hmm. And that kind of, at least part of it is the fact you can do things you can do things whatever you want means that for me, I have to. I mean, especially I came to comics late, and I came to comics to want to write comics. Mm-hmm. I came to comics late as a medium, and then when I got into writing comics, I wanted to write comics. Mm-hmm. I'm not someone who just wants to tell stories. I'm interested in comics. I'm interested in how the media works. I'm interested in what we can do. So that's why. So now we've got this very large canvas to play with. We should use it, and we should throw all these ideas on the page. Mm-hmm. This goes as a critic and as an appreciator. I tend to be a neophile. I like new things. I like seeing things. I like ideally picking up a piece of art and going, oh, I've never seen that before. Mm-hmm. I'm quite a fan of novelty. So, giving this opportunity, hell yes, we like to. Same with Young Avengers. Even it was always a thing that okay, there's going to be one thing every issue at least. People pick it up and go, oh, that's amazing, or like what are they going to do to the form next? Compared to like serious art creators, we're not that high. But that in terms of working in a quasi mainstream place, oh yeah, we try to push it quite hard. And even like really basic stuff, it's like all the stuff we do with cutting up panels, like in terms of like trying to get more pages out of an issue, and how obviously the remix issue is the apex of that. The idea here is a comics page. We kind of reject that idea, and the idea of what is a comics issue, is it 20 pages of comics, or is it like 20 pages of comics I've turned into like 25 pages of comics by magic? Mm-hmm. I mean, I look at say John Hickman.
Yeah.
Have you read the Black Monday Murders?
I was going to ask you about that because I saw you tweet it. Yeah, it's amazing.
Yeah, it's astounding. It's like Hickman is like, I get quite there's one of the regular critiques Hickman got about his Marvel work is all those kind of pages. Why are we paying this money for all these kind of random design pages? Mm-hmm. And of course, the truth is you're not paying for those pages. Those pages Hickman do for free. Mm-hmm. If you do those pages, you would just be left with the art. Mm-hmm. He's added this. He's basically, I've got an issue. I'm going to fill the space. I can use, since drawing art costs a lot of money, but doing design is very cheap. I can use space as meaning. Mm-hmm. And I will try to give people more value. So I can only imagine how frustrating it must be for Jonathan to put in extra work and have people critique him for being lazy. Mm. That's like makes me want to choke people.
Yeah, I interviewed him for a design article I did, and I asked him about he's very well known for having circles in his design pieces, and he shared a story about somebody getting very upset with him at a con about like basically threw a copy of I think Infinity, maybe it wasn't Infinity, but a copy of the book at him. He was like, and you could take your damn circles or something like that, because the person apparently did not like that. But I think it's I think to a certain degree, like readers, I've mentioned this before, but sometimes people act like reviews are consumer reports, where they're like looking at the cost value benefit or a cost value analysis. And for like Jonathan's work, who I think is just amazing, and you read through the Black Monday Murders and there adds so much depth to that. Like I was going back and forth from page to page over and over as I was reading that book, trying to figure out what the icons meant, trying to figure out what all the like this stuff that's building the universe in front of us. It's kind of like you look back at Watchmen, and there's some people who look at like the Tales of the Black Freighter stuff as like what is this guy doing? If I wanted to read a book, I'd read a book. I don't want to read all this prose stuff. But I mean, all that stuff is building story, and it's hitting hard story beats. And that's the thing I like about Jonathan is like the stuff he does in like East of West, and even in his Avengers and New Avengers and Secret Wars stuff, was like he's not using that as filler, that like some people think. It's like, oh, they're just putting a splash page in there just because they don't want to put in more art. But it's like, it's hard story beats that are actually trying to change the way you're engaging with the story, and I love that. I think it's amazing.
It's like especially Black Monday Murders, the way I phrase it is reader is detective. You know, it's like, because, you know, I did exactly the same. You move back and forth in the issue and check things, and it's like you're puzzling it out. You know, the lead character is the detective, and the reader is also a detective. You know, like, I guarantee, like, both of us, having committed to the book, would have got more to it than someone who's just sort of read it. You know, that's kind of, A, that's brave as hell. And B, but it's very rewarding, as in that, because you kind of feel engaged with the sense of place of it. You get the idea of this kind of sprawling conspiracy, and it works really, really very well. And the way I put it on Twitter was like, Jonathan sees the cage, and the cage I meant to us. People said, "Do you mean just the do you mean the concept of a 20-page comic?" And I'm like, "Yeah, it includes that, but it's not just that. As in, what are the cages of telling a story? What are the cages in society itself? Because Jonathan's major preconceptions as a writer, at least to me, is his structural reading of things. How, you know, Jonathan is someone who sees these very large systems and views humans as kind of being crushed by them. You know, or how can you manipulate these systems? How can, you know what I mean?
Yeah, totally.
He's very interested in, okay, what are the limits? You know, that kind of like, he won't answer. He never will answer. You get the sense he will never answer a question unless he's dissected the question and what it actually means. You know, and I kind of think a little bit like that, but Jonathan goes so much further than I do. Jonathan is somebody I think is really very interesting. So there's a little bit of that, you know, and in, at least part of it, me, when I was at Marvel, I was one of the first people to go down to 20-page books. So I was aware that my books had less content than everyone else. So I was like paranoid. So I did like all manner of things, even at Marvel, to try to work out how to get extra pages of copy. And some of it was some of the stuff Jonathan did, as in terms of like black page title drops as spaces to get page turns. But I did quite a bit of stuff in Journey into Mystery where I reused pages and relettered them in different ways, and we returned to a scene, and you know,
I love those.
And which is, you know, it's fun, it's rewarding, and it's interesting to see. But it was also me. The main motivation was, how can I get more pages into this comic for people? And that was always the primary one, and that kind of carried on forward. And now when I'm in a position where, because I couldn't do, you know, when we do stuff like 6-panel grids and in WicDiv, one of our standard moves is a 6-panel grid, and half the grid is black squares, and that basically is half a page of work for Jamie. But it's a page worth of content in terms of like, if you for certain spacing and time and stuff. So we do a lot of thinking like that, and of course it kind of, and there's definitely, abstractly there's no more than 20 pages of work an issue. In practice there's quite a lot more occasionally, as in Jamie will say, Kieron, that really wasn't half a page's work, you know. And it's definitely the bits where the fact that WicDiv is doing quite well means that Jamie feels encouraged to do that, you know. It's not like it's wasted effort.
One thing,
but yeah, but you know, yeah, actually, sorry, the full point, yes, where at least part of it is like, we want to make a mythology for 2014, the year we started, and it was obvious, okay, we want to show what comics can do, and the idea of like, here is a book that will constantly challenge people's understanding of what they're reading. At least part of it was the idea that, you know, it's basically the comic will be about 5 years long, you know, 4 years worth of issues, but probably 5 years long. And the idea was taking like an 18-year-old Young Avengers reader who's just come out of that and going for this 5-year basically degree and postgrad course, and when they come out at the end of this 5 years, they'll be ready to take over the world. You know, the idea is basically, I'm going to teach you everything I know about comics. I'm going to teach you all my ideas. I'm going to teach you the idea that comics should be exciting and new, and whatever you want them to be.
You're training the next generation of Kieron Gillens.
Oh no, no, absolutely not. The idea is, if everything's Kieron's learned, for God's sake, be better than me. You know, because a lot of it's, you know, the characters are all fuck ups, and I've always said that the characters are all me. So it's this kind of like, here's everything I've learned. I'm a 40-year-old guy. For God's sake, be better than I was. That's one of the major things running through WicDiv. But, you know, I was someone who was transformed by comics, or, you know, like many people in the 90s, the Invisibles or whatever, you know? And the idea of being basically a very pop noughties pop teens Invisibles, yeah, I can see that. And this part of commercial suicide, to get back to the actual question. But this part of commercial suicide was that, the idea, okay, the first arc was meant to be really pop, and the second arc's a bit weirder, and the third arc is really fucking weird, you know, as in we're going to all very different places now. And then we pull back, and this last arc's kind of like the second year of the second volume of Invisibles, and then we go somewhere else. So yeah, there was at least a kind of a push and pull and trying to. I'm trying to remember this. But yeah, there's definitely a kind of like, let's try this, and we want to. I'm never going to do another book like this. I don't think I have another 5-year comic series in me. Me and Jamie certainly will never do anything this long ever again. The one thing about a 5-year comic series, no one ever does another one after the back. Everybody who's done that big 60, 70 issue Vertigo thing has immediately not done long form work for several years. This takes a lot. I'm only halfway through, and I can already see what we're going to be at the end. So this is our one chance to be really fucking good. So we just don't want to blow it.
I think two things that are really cool that you guys have done in the series so far is, one thing I really liked was in issue number 8, which I thought was one of the best issues of the series. I love the countdown thing that you guys did on the pages during the party for Dionysus. Did I pronounce it right? And like the funny thing is I've been reading comics for almost my entire life, and I had like this weird moment where I had to like kind of reteach my brain on how to read that to a certain degree, because like I wasn't reading it right at first. I was reading across the page and I was reading it down, and I was like, I don't know which way to read this. But then I realized, but anyways, and another thing I really liked is, and I'm not going to spoil what happened in number 22, but I thought it was really interesting that like I had in my mind that, let's say, X was the villain of the series, and it turns out Y was somebody that we might not even know is the darkness, the what might be behind, like might be the big deal behind everything. And I thought it was it was an interesting and risky move in its own right, because it's kind of like, did you ever read Fables? Yeah. So like, it's like, Fables, like you thought the whole thing was building to the adversary getting taken out, and that ends in like issue 70, 75. Yeah, 75. And then like there's 75 more issues after that. And you're like, where do we go from here? And so, but I mean, I'm not saying that was a bad choice, but I thought that was like, when I read 22, I was like actually kind of shocked by that. I'm like, I am really excited to see where it goes from here, because I did not expect that.
It's kind of like, I saw many people in the lead up to 22. It's like, it always feels like people presuming maybe it ends soon, because it just feels like the end of the plot. And it's like, yeah, no. I mean, it's one of those things, you're entirely right. There's we have kind of done some really, we're kind of known for those kind of big ballsy moves, especially at the end of, I mean, sorry, that sounds awful, but people are kind of like used to the concept of like, OMFG, what happens now? I mean, like when the first issue came out, everyone loved Lucifer. And spoilers for WicDiv's first 2 volumes coming up quite soon. And like Lucifer, and Jamie dropped a line is, are you at all nervous about killing our most popular character off in issue 5? And I'm like, yes! Yes, I really am. And then, so, we get through that and people are okay. And then we, apparently kill Laura off at the end of issue 11.
Yeah.
And then we have 6 issues of guest stars, just with no one in them. And at every stage we're nervous. And like we're kind of, especially like the commercial suicide, which we call commercial suicide, at least in part because we thought it, chances are it could kill the book. And we kind of planned that issue 18 to be a clean start. So like, if we genuinely our sales figures crashed, the idea that, issue 18, well, big hype, Jamie is back on the book, it's a clean entry point, and it's very, it's very immediately pop. That was always part of the planning. In the actual fact, we didn't need it. The sales were great. But that was always part of our sort of, are we going to push the readers too far?
Right.
And no, they've kind of, there was that kind of bit like, if they've gone with us here, they'll probably go with us to the end. Is that kind of like, we've got really big stuff ahead of us, obviously. But I think like, if people are invested with the story so far, it's like, they presume we have a reason for stuff. And we do. That's the kind of, at least part of the structure of the reason. Like the book, obviously it's end of every arc is a big sort of status quo change, but specifically every year, the year is like, a very big change. So each of the 4 years have a different sort of feel. Like the first year was very much about Laura's growth as a fangirl, leading to where she gets to. And the second year is what we've just seen. And the third year has this completely different feel, as, evidenced by the Imperial Phase of it all. That kind of, the gods are going to be doing this now.
What if they don't have oversight?
Yeah, exactly. This is the decadent prog rock album. This is like the joke aside. It's like the last one's been very much a pop album.
Yeah.
Deliberately. So it's like I use Taylor Swift's Bad Blood video as my metaphor. But this next one is huge. The idea this is sprawling. This is basically about when a band gets a bit too successful, as in what do they do after the big pop album? They kind of get collapsing on themselves, and they get self-indulgent, they get druggy. There's a lot of sex going on. It's very behind the music. It's kind of in outro, in that kind of, oh yeah, we did a big pop album. Are we willing to live with it?
It reminds me of MGMT's Congratulations.
Oh yeah, I mean, this is like this. I mean, the biggest thing about this next arc is going to be as a writer is that it's about self-indulgence. Mm-hmm. So how to do that without just being self-indulgent and shitty. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I've got a variety of tactics I think that will work, but it's a challenge. I mean, there's certainly an argument of WicDiv in that the whole 4-year structure is meant to mirror a creative life. Mm-hmm. As in all like a pop creator's life and the rise and the fall and where it ends up and all that kind of stuff.
That's really fascinating. I hadn't thought of it like that.
I think people won't really understand WicDiv until they get to the end.
Yeah, I saw you say that in an interview, and I'm like, God. Well, I mean, obviously, I want to get to the end, but I'll enjoy the journey on the way. But speaking of,
I'll tell you what. Randomly, as the thing is, I've come to terms with that now. Is it's all about the journey, and it's kind of like obviously, I've got this big structural thing, but WicDiv is kind of about me getting over my own shit, and I'm kind of a bit of a control freak. Mm-hmm. And they're doing this very big, large structure has maybe kind of loosened up a little in terms of like, people are going to get completely different things from this. And yes, I have this big wanky purpose for it, but it's not all about that. It's not, this is actually a raconteur kind of thing. Anyway, sorry, you were saying.
No. I was just going to say, like, I thought one of the, I mentioned before that I was going to bring up the survey, and you guys recently ran a fan survey, and the results ran in the back of issue number 21, and I thought that one of the interesting things that you said before was like you were talking about how like you guys were going to kill off your most popular character, Lucifer, and she's still the most popular character. I think that's like amazing. Like you guys, I think it's really fascinating to see how like your fans have like carried on. It's like they still love like one of the singles from the first album, and it was proven in the survey results.
Oh yeah, I mean, Lucy's kind of our Sid Barrett,
Yeah.
It's like, Pink Floyd carried on and got more successful, but there's if you're a hardcore fan, it's all about Lucy.
Yeah.
I think it's interesting. I mean, there's nothing. The reason we did those polls was very much like we get a read on people, like we get a read on the fan base, but like we thought, what else could we get? So yeah, the numbers are all very interesting. I wasn't surprised of Lucifer still being like, is it Lucifer and Persephone or Persephone and Lucifer?
I think it was Persephone was second.
I'm gonna just call up the WicDiv poll results.
I was really surprised that Amaterasu was the least popular non-murderer of the cast.
Yeah, it's Amaterasu is also one of the most listed after characters, which I surprised. So that surprised me. As in, like, I couldn't work out why Lucifer. Sorry, Amaterasu is. So I'm literally scrolling down the list. Favourite god, Lucifer 19.9%, Persephone 18.2%, and Inanna 14.2%. Mm-hmm. Amaterasu down to 3.1%, like Beneath the Norns. But least favourite god is
Woden.
Yeah, obviously Woden, bless him.
I was actually going to bring up. I told you this in email. I like Woden, and I'm like, I know it's kind of horrible to say because
It's like you like Woden, or you're not saying I am like Woden.
No, yeah, that is a careful clarification. I am not like Woden. It's not that I see myself in him, but I love in issue 22. You see that he's not committed at all to what he's doing. He's opportunistic and focused on survival. But like, I don't know. That's the thing I really liked about the survey. Besides the fact I'm a total numbers nerd, is like it's interesting to see how everyone kind of engages with your guys' comic in different ways. I mean, not really. Obviously, they're all reading it, but at the same time, it's like the audience, like everyone gets something different out of it, and I find that to be really fascinating.
There's a reason why there's that very big cast. Like there's basically 14 lead characters, or like 14 main characters, and like a lot of other people. At least part of it's because I'm going to kill them all off. But so I needed a lot to begin with. But that's a lot. I mean, like my main thing with writing the Marvel Universe was never try to do a team book with more than 6 characters. I tried to do it with 9, and it's really, really hard. Mm-hmm. And now I'm trying to do one with 14. But I sort of knew the structure, and obviously with the deaths, but I also knew the fact that there must be the fact that we have a lead character changes the dynamic a bit. But there was so much about there thinking, okay, people embed in different ways, and and the characters are all deeply flawed. Even like there's people who are on an angst side,
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of the book I didn't really want to, black hat my villains.
Right.
Even the people I agree with most as a reader, they have big flaws in. Cassandra is, my metacritical voice trying to bash the cast around the head for being idiots. But even she's got big problems. She has big holes in her critical reasoning. And that's the kind of the thing. It's like and that is just interesting.
Mm-hmm.
That's it. Also, just going the most listed after characters. Lucifer is the highest, then Persephone, then Amaterasu.
Mm-hmm.
Which that was one that surprised me, and that that genuinely, I can see Lucifer, see Persephone just beneath his Baal and Baphomet,
Mm-hmm.
and another, and I can sort of see them. But Amaterasu being that high, and I sort of realise Amaterasu is that kind of, if you're into a certain sort of personality type, she's the only person of that personality type in the comic.
Mm-hmm.
Therefore, anybody who likes people who are basically kind of nice, performative nice, and that mode, that she probably gets all the votes of people who are into that, which I find fascinating. Anyway, enough of me.
Oh, I was gonna say I don't want to go too far down this, but I do think there is a certain level of redheaded appeal too. Like she stands out in that way too. Like her.
Oh yeah.
The Matt's colors on that is like glorious.
Oh yeah, I mean, actually, like the way for Amaterasu is she's not one of the league. In terms of you have to divide the gods into how important they've been in the story.
Sure.
And we change that around. That changes as we go along.
Mm-hmm.
But Amaterasu is generally be a B character.
Mm-hmm.
And she's quite, she gets bigger in the next arc. As in, we kind of, some characters have been quite big, step back, and some for one step forward.
Mm-hmm.
But despite that position, she is one of the icons of the series. The first WicDiv cosplayer I ever saw of Amaterasu.
Mm-hmm.
And she was the first image. I mean, the first image in the modern story is basically, the first image anyone remembers is Laura in the crowd looking at the god on stage.
Yeah.
It's two 17-year-old girls.
Mm-hmm.
And that was one of the first images that came to me when writing. I was on a transatlantic flight listening to Florence and the Machine,
mm-hmm.
and I saw it, this kind of this incandescent figure on stage, and the kind of the girl, and the distance and the similarity between the two.
Mm-hmm.
She's such an important part of the book's iconography.
Mm-hmm. She's our introduction to the world.
Yeah, absolutely.
So one of the things I thought was the most interesting about the poll was. Obviously, I don't think we need to say this, but it's worth saying that it was only, I don't remember how many people it was, but it's not every reader of WicDiv. But I do think it's really interesting how young it skewed. 58.8% were 18 to 29, and it's like comics are a medium that's perceived as skewing older. Do you think this speaks more to the WicDiv audience, or how the overall comic audience is diversifying in recent years?
Good question. I think everyone else would have to do their own polls for us to actually speculate on that.
I know.
And that's the best thing. Google polls are really robust. It's very easy to set up. I think every creator should do their own, and then we get some numbers. Let's actually do this properly, guys. I mean, it's not a surprise though. Like Young Avengers, me and Jamie have explicitly been trying to diversify the demographics ever since we've been in comics. I'm both we've that the early noughties generation that came from the Warren Ellis forum that believed in diversity of genre and just trying to not fall down the same holes that comics, and not so introspective is the word that comes to mind. I don't mean that. Navel gazing is probably the better.
Sure.
We're not a big fan of comics about comics, and the idea of you take away that Will Eisner's love of theatre, you take away Will Eisner. You take away Burroughs, you don't really have Morrison. You take away Pynchon, you don't have Moore. And I'm just basically paraphrasing an old Warren Ellis argument to give him credit. As in basically comics should take from elsewhere, and at the same time that leads to more work that leads to people who wouldn't traditionally be reading it. I mean, me and Jamie, we started Phonogram's a really obscure beast. Mm-hmm. But we're kind of aware that we're doing a comic for people who don't go to comic shops. And that helped with the sales, let me tell you.
Oh, yeah.
But that's kind of changed, I remember something Ellis said when we launched WicDiv, and that I think comics have kind of caught up with you guys now. Mm-hmm. In terms of the audience is there for the work we're trying to do. Mm-hmm. And if you see our sales, it's very clearly true. So it's a bit of the kind of, as in basically demographic change in an audience is slow.
Right.
It's just a long battle. You have to put out work and keep it there. I remember one of my friends next table to me at a con, and he said, after you guys have done your Avengers, the average age of your people who are coming up to get signing has dropped by a decade.
That's what they observed?
Yeah.
That's amazing.
It's pretty. I mean, we all had a pretty young audience anyway, Mm-hmm. But yeah, it's distinctly, and the audience of Young Avengers are passionate and diverse and often brilliant. And I remember the launch of WicDiv when we were at the Image Expo. The signing queue came for us because we were special guests. They weren't even knowing we would be there. The people who came to get stuff signed just because they went and grabbed stuff, they were like a dream comic audience is the best way of putting it.
Mm-hmm.
you know, they were young and diverse, but both like in ethnicity and in gender and in sexuality and all that. You know, that's kind of we just want to have more sorts of people reading comics. So yeah, I mean, anyway, it's like I say, it was about 1,500 people respond. You know, and the first WicDiv trade's done over 100k. So it's like, and we do like about 20k in singles per issue, and it's very hard to work out how much digital we do per issue. Last time I did the maths, it was about 25%. So there was like another 5,000 in digital. So that's like, so 1,500 out of all that isn't a lot, but it's an interesting subsection of a hardcore WicDiv audience. Especially with you know, only 37% of people identify as straight in that audience.
Yeah. No,
that's really low. You know.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, that's really low.
Yeah, no, and I thought, I mean, there's like I thought there was so much interesting stuff in there, but one of the things I thought was the most interesting was the fact that it continued in your write-up on Tumblr. You saw that like, or you shared that retailers have shared a lot of anecdotal evidence that people are double dipping on covers, and you said that, you know, you're happy to see that the number of people who were getting both covers was lower than what you had heard, because you want more actual readers rather than people double dipping. I'm pretty sure I know the answer to this already, but if you guys don't want them to double dip, why do you do variants at all?
It's very interesting. We did talk about this. I think obviously most people stop doing variants at one point during their run because it's pointless, as in the sales on the variant dips, so it becomes unprofitable to do it. Our variant numbers have never dipped.
Really?
Yeah. I was like a steady like 5-6k, and that's got, and like, I'm not quite sure why. And we think, I don't. Our hope is because we curate it quite tightly. You know, we're kind of at the end of WicDiv. We kind of hope that our covers will be a collection of the best comic artists working the period of the book, and especially new artists as well. And like, we want to do a covers book at the end and all that kind of thing. And it's such you know, they're people putting in such beautiful work. Yeah. That's kind of thing. So we kind of hope it's just by quality. And of course, it's a book about iconography as well, which is a theme I'll come back to. Therefore, seeing these gods presented and treated as worth alternate covers, you know, treated in the way that people treat these Marvel icons, that's also powerful for people. Then they're kind of like, oh yeah, we're as good as them, if not better. Sorry, I'm desperately. So I'm very much in a punchy mode today. But, you know, that kind of thing. So the fact that many people don't double dip means that, you know, we feel fine with that. But at the same time, we talked to Image about it. So if we stop doing the covers, because obviously it is extra work, do you think how many, you know, would those sales transfer over? And like, no. Yeah. Basically, if we stop doing covers, basically we'll drop 6k an issue.
Right.
And it's that kind of like, because retailers they just don't think like that. You know, they would, you know, even if they, you know, retailers don't necessarily move numbers around like that. So we're kind of basically trained to doing, you know, secondary covers until the end of the run, unless we want to lose a large number of sales. Well, so yeah, so basically, it's basically we've sort of put ourselves into we've got a tiger by the tail, basically. So yeah, we have to carry on doing them, but at the same time, we also wanted to carry on doing them, which is lucky. I mean, at the moment, I'm just doing the artists and X art, which is really, you know, this is the best thing. Like, we're just getting the covers in now, and like Emily Lennox is doing one, and Nicola Scott's going to do one. Yeah, it's all really very good fun. Actually, Jen Bartel is probably the first one. Jen's doing an astounding cover.
Oh, is that why she was doing the Persephone stuff on Twitter?
No, that's that. She was just doing that as a guest.
Oh my god,
I'd seen that. I'd seen that before she'd actually we'd asked her to do a cover. But I asked her to do a cover because I saw her raving about WicDiv on Twitter, and it's like now would be a good time to ask her to do a cover.
It's so good. Like, her work is just really amazing. But I do. This is extremely anecdotal, and you should absolutely not look at me as a bellwether for anything, because I'm weird. I don't buy comics like most people do, but I've only intentionally pursued 2 variant covers in my entire life, and both were WicDiv. One was the white Lucy variant for #1 for the Forbidden Planet and Jetpack Comics one. I love that cover, and then the other one was the Ollie Moss variant for #22. Like, those are the only variants I've ever bought.
Ollie was really strong. Have you seen the 3D? Have you seen he did a GIF of the 3D model?
I didn't.
Oh, Google. It's hard to find, but he did put up an actual animated GIF of the whole thing so he could rotate it.
Oh, that's amazing.
Ollie's a friend, and obviously he's like an incredible designer and artist. And it's like he's wanted to do one for a while, and we managed to work it out. And he said, "Oh, I want to do Lucy. Is that okay?" And I was like, "Yeah." It's like, yeah, she's not in the issue. She's dead. Yeah, it still kind of speaks to the mood of the book. And people, the artists really. The artists do really interesting work. I think, like, the last 5 have been especially strong. Yeah, it's interesting stuff.
So I only have a few more questions for you because I know you got to go. But I have a random theory time. This is where I get weird. Looking at the survey results and how many people buy multiple versions of the same story, and buy like hardcovers. I mean, I own the single issues, but I also own the hardcover. And I'll probably keep buying it in hardcovers, even though I keep buying single issues. I wonder if the work that you, Jamie, Matt, Clayton, and the rest do, if you guys, and I feel like you're gonna love this. If you guys actually, your fandom actually behaves more similar to a band's fandom than normal comic team's fandom, because like you guys have merch. It seems like when you're like, let's say I like Spoon, like I really like the band Spoon, and I buy a single for now I can't even think of a Spoon song. I'm a horrible Spoon fan. Like I buy a single and then I buy an EP that has the same track on it, and then I buy the full album on it, plus merch. Like I have Spoon shirts, I have Spoon random stuff. It kind of feels like that. Do you feel like your community of fans kind of behave differently than the average fandom, or do you think that's more like, again, more specific to like the way that fandom is changing these days?
I think it's like, part of me thinks maybe comics fandom's always been a bit like that.
Okay.
I mean, like, it's like comics. There was a time when people just buy every Marvel comic because they're Marvel fans. That doesn't exist as much anymore. But, that kind of the completionist fan aspect has kind of always been there a bit. I mean, what is comic collecting other than a desperate urge to have everything of something?
That's true.
And I also remember when The Authority came out, The Authority Absolute Edition, which of course that was the first of this new generation of big hardback deluxe things, and I bought that. And at the time, I definitely couldn't afford it. So yeah, and that kind of, you know what I mean? But you say it does feed into the box collect. I have bands who I have box collections of, and I have all the stuff, and I wouldn't. I mean, in comics, I can't even think of how many versions of Casanova I have.
Oh yeah.
I mean, it's like maybe 6 the first. Like, I've got Casanova in every single format it's ever been out in, including all the singles. So it must be about 6 formats by now. So yeah, a bit. I mean, there's definitely kind of a bandy aspect to us, and then there's also the meta aspect about WicDiv, and it's a comic about fandom. It's a comic about loving things and using that and how that changes you. And there's like the stuff we do, like the in-universe T-shirts, like the WicDiv, the fan. You buy the T-shirts that the fans are wearing in the comic.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So like you can cosplay as a WicDiv fan to show that you're a fan of WicDiv. That kind of like meta nonsense. That's very us. And kind of there's definitely a strata of WicDiv fan who like that. They like the playing with it. They like, I've encouraged people to make their own, think of themselves as making their own gods and that kind of thing. That kind of making it your own. So yeah, there's certainly a degree of band. I mean, we get moments of it. I mean, like, we get very powerful responses from quite a lot of fans. It happens common enough to us to kind of like not get used to it, but it's still a thing. And people get us to DJ. That's always funny. WicDiv fans can throw down.
That's amazing. Well, I want to ask another question about the community thing, because I think like, like when I was a kid, I was a gigantic X-Men fan, and there was like huge amounts of X-Men fans around. This might be partially an internet thing, but you look at like Sex Criminals and the Brimpers, and you look at Saga, and I don't think they really have an official name, but like they obviously have their hordes of readers who are hyper passionate, and you guys are no different. How important was it for you guys to not just like make a comic, but to like help foster this community? Because it feels like you guys really embrace your fans in a very like quality and like prolific way.
Yeah, I feel like it's like, I'm trying to look at, is it something positive or negative, or is it actually just really about the fact I'm somebody who was transformed by art, and I want this to be like a really worthwhile experience for people. So if someone was to embed into the fandom and like really, there is added value for them to dig into it. I do these big writer's notes and kind of like edit, there's lots of extra material. I remember like, I've just forgot the name of the writer. Doesn't matter. A writer friend of mine, Kieron, you write more about your comics than people write for their scripts. And it's like, I realised, oh yeah, he's right. There's some people who do like 4,000 word scripts, and I write 4,000 notes on each one of my issues. And that's not normal. And it's like, partially it's because I want to put all that stuff out there for people. And partially it's the kind I'm desperately insecure in that kind of like, we were kind of WicDiv, we wanted it to be we were aware that we had our perhaps one chance of doing a big book, and actually, after Young Avengers, people were actually paying attention to us. But let's not fuck this up. Mm. And there's a lot of that. So it's like we knew, and people actually, we kind of like amble along. So people often think to us like, oh, you're really, you guys are really clever when you do this and this and this. And we're like, ooh. Well, it's not like much of it is planned, but all of it is thought about. Mm-hmm. I mean, like we end up talking. Okay, we call it Wicked Divine. That title is far too long for Twitter. So we shorten it to WicDiv, and right. we hashtag it early, and we seed that in the community. And at least part of the reason we seed it that early, have you noticed what the acronym of WicDiv is?
No.
Twatted. And there's like, if you left the internet to keep its own sense, it would call the book Twatted. Mm-hmm. And the book is, there's definitely book. If Sex Criminals shortened itself to Twatted, that would suit the tone of the book.
Right.
But it doesn't suit WicDiv. So it's that kind of for the kind of icon branding nonsense. We had to sort of seed that early. So yeah, that would be a good example of it. So yeah, it's like there's a weird sort of, having spent most of my career in this kind of, oh my god, how can we actually sell enough to carry on eating?
Right.
That's been the majority of my career in my indie comics, as in how can Jamie eat this month? Mm-hmm. WicDiv is a completely different sort of thing. WicDiv is, oh god, how can we not fuck this up? Yeah. As a WicDiv is it's a shockingly successful book, and I find that scary because that's not that's not how I view myself. But at the same time, it's like how could this possibly go wrong? Is a different sort of thing. It's that kind of heavy as the head that rests the crown kind of aspect to it. Mm-hmm. Which is that's why the joke of Imperial Phase. That Imperial Phase has been a running joke me and Jamie have been using. Like any time we buy like an extra packet of chocolates or something, it's like, it doesn't matter, Imperial Phase. And now the book does its own Imperial Phase. So yeah, does that answer the question?
Yeah, totally. Yeah, no, I mean, it makes a lot of sense. But I have one last question, and this is probably a horrible question to ask as like the last question with a time frame on it. But you and I kind of, in a weird way, have like similar origins when it comes to what we do in comics. You, along with Matt Fraction, Kelly Sudaconic, and an array of other creators. God, who was I just talking to that came up on there? I can't remember. Anyways, like kind of were raised by the Warren Ellis forums. Like they were kind of your origin point for like kind of like okay, anyways, I'm poorly phrasing this question. The way I got into writing about comics was because I was in like a used bookstore and I found a copy of like a print version of his CBR column, Coming Alone.
Yeah.
And I read that and I was like, holy crap, this is like completely changing the way I think about comics. And not just because everything was just like, solid gold or something like that, but just the way he thinks about comics was so fascinating. What about Warren Ellis do you think was so inspirational for maybe kind of this generation of creators and people who just engage with comics? I know that's super broad and completely random, but I had to ask that.
A lot of it's kind of right time, right place. It's just kind of, my origin story is basically, I often say I never got into comics until I was 25, which is a lie. I read comics as a kid and then sort of fell out as a teenager. Mm-hmm. And when I was 21, I got into Watchmen. I read Watchmen and I fell in love with it. So I basically became an Alan Moore fan when I was 21. Mm-hmm. And then I, for reasons, I eventually drifted to a comic shop trying to get the ABC comics. And I found Authority one week and read it. Astounded. The explosions caught up my imagination. I went back next week, picked up Planetary, which is like more obscure, more like richer, more flavoursome. Came back next week, Transmetropolitan, which was exactly what I needed to read as a kind of almost burnt out journalist. Mm-hmm. Then, like a few weeks after that, I discovered the Warren Ellis forum. Mm-hmm. Go there, lurking. I still remember the first thread I started, which was, "Why do not more comics?" I lurked for months before starting a thread, and the thread was, "Why do not?" Considering Watchmen was like one of the most successful comics of all time, why do so few comics use 9-panel grids? Mm-hmm. Which is a sort of you know what I mean? That's a wanky formalist kind of question. And then like I interviewed Warren, for as part of my job. Actually, 6 months after I on the Warren Ellis forum, I did my first Comic-Con. I write my first script that night. And a year after that, I'm selling photocopies of a comic script, a comic book I'd done, and up meeting Jamie, and the rest is kind of history. Mm-hmm. But the WEF was, at least part of it's kind of a flashpoint, as a lot of people suddenly got the internet, mm-hmm. and they got internet in a reference way, right. And forums were at their height, mm-hmm. and one was up. He chose to create a forum. He did it, and he built up a culture, and he was kind of quite deliberately Stalinistically, as we kind of, Stalin as the nickname went. I think this is what I'm going to talk about. And Warren let his own passions of like, this is how I think comics should be. You know, that's what Coming Alone was. Coming Alone was obviously influential on me as well.
Mm-hmm.
And okay, comics can be like this. And it's weird because, you know, and all of us were on there and we're doing our various experimental crap comics, and some of them are good. And we, you know, I'm sure me and Fraction have talked about this, but like, we're convinced we're going to change comics in like 5 years.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and sort of the joke is, you know, you look at the image of 2016. Oh yeah, that's what we're trying to do. You know, that's the weird thing is, oh yeah, this is all the ideas we were playing with back then.
Yeah.
And it just took a lot longer to get there when we thought it was.
Mm-hmm.
And it's sort of our joke is like, you know, comics creators tend to be defeatist. We tend to be quite downbeat.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. This is what winning feels like. And you know, we're in a position of authority, weirdly. You know, and it'll all collapse. And you know, that's the nature of a creative's life.
Mm-hmm.
But you know, that all those ideas of the West, the idea that comics should be more diverse, comics should not just have to be about superheroes. Comics should, you know, serve many different people.
Mm-hmm. They shouldn't look just like one thing.
Comics should be like bookshop. Warren's very yeah, exactly. Comics can be anything. I mean, this is kind of the comics for everyone is you know, the Geordie Blair line, but comics for everyone also does that imply that all comics should be for everyone?
Mm-hmm.
You know, and for comics to be everyone, and for comics to be for everyone, they need much enormous more variety than we were traditionally doing.
Yeah.
So yeah, so a lot of those ideas were really addictive. And you know, we were all young, getting quite angry.
Yeah.
And you know, there was a level of like posture. I mean, that was kind of the WEF at its worst. You know, when the WEF was like, you kind of punk rock elitists. You know, when I chatted to Sam Humphries interviewed me. I mean, Sam Humphries, there's another guy from the WEF, and we were talking about this in an interview. And he was like, and I just went for the line because I knew Sam was trying to bait me into it. Basically, the WEF of the CBGBs of Naughty's comics. In terms of, all those people were there and they formed bands, and you know, some got bigger, some didn't. So yeah, that was just. I mean, for me, as somebody who was new to comics, and this is the very personal aspect. You know, Fraction didn't have this. I didn't know what to read. You know, I was new to. I didn't know comics, so it acted as my sort of liberal education.
Yeah.
Like every week I was on there, and it was like, what should I read next? What should I read next? And I think like if I was entering comics into 2016. I wouldn't have that. There's not really a place like that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, totally.
And the only, you know, there's not really a community, a wider comic community you can go, because people kind of forget how big the WEF was. You know, it was a very big kind of, you know, it was closed down pretty much because it got too big.
Mm-hmm.
And so that kind of easy one place entrance point to sort of be a way into comics isn't there anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And the only advantage of that is there's so much more variety of comics people can read now, and how much more easily accessible they are. It doesn't really matter. You know, I'm sure people will actually find their way to the interesting stuff.
Yeah, it is much more drinking from a fire hose than before, when you could actually go to a forum and ask and just say, this is what I like, what would you recommend? But, yeah, it's interesting. I do think it's
remember?
Oh, sorry.
Do you remember Art Bomb?
Art Bomb, no.
Oh, man. So I was thinking about Art Bomb recently. Art Bomb was a site that Ellis, Kelly Sue, Fraction, and AD set up. And it was basically them, for writers, reviewing graphic novels. And they basically, it was links to where you could buy them, and it was by genre. And here was basically not like reviewing in terms of good, bad, and indifferent, only stuff that's worth reading. Mm-hmm. So it was basically the entryist element. So in other words, you go to this site, I like fantasy, oh, Sandman, that sounds interesting, or whatever else is in there.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, these short capsule, like 200-word reviews or whatever. You know, and that's the sort of thing like, you know, Fraction, Kelly Sue, and Matt and AD doing, you know, these short pieces. That I would read a book of that, you know what I mean? As in these, you know, three enormously creative voices inside comics, and AD who's sort of very well outside comics. And I would love something like that exists now. I haven't got time to do it. You know, that kind of an actual site which is created and small enough to be useful.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I miss that. You know, that's the sort of thing the WEF and all the spin-off forums were about.
Mm-hmm.
You know, here's an idea, let's try it. And some of the stuff didn't really work,
mm-hmm.
and some of the stuff really did.
Didn't Matt actually create a like zine? I don't know if it was like a zine, but like a kind
of Savant.
Yeah, Savant. That's it. Yeah.
Yeah. Matt. That was like a web mail list thing. Of course, the mailing lists are back. Everything comes back into fashion, even web stuff. So yeah, there was. I mean, I did a site called Panel Bleed, which never really worked properly. Mm-hmm. That was a similar thing. Quite a few years later, me and Charlie Chu, who is now at Oni.
That's who I forgot.
Yes, Charlie.
I'm sorry, Charlie.
Yes, and that was us doing like random bits of comic reviewing or whatever, or like ranting in my case. Yeah,
I do think it's funny that 2016 is like kind of the WEF forums Imperial Phase, because it's very fitting, very fitting. But thank you so much for coming on and chatting with me, Kieron. I really appreciate you taking the time.
My pleasure. I'm just very excited to be here. And actually, I briefly want to mention, because obviously the WicDiv special is coming out.
Oh, yes.
Which we're putting together, which is like me and Stephanie, which is really interesting. And we're also doing the Kevin Wada issue, like the first issue back after. So we're basically doing the special in September. So that's all the romantic poets, basically. So Byron is Lucifer, basically.
Oh.
Yeah. The next month, the actual trade comes out, which is the obviously rising action. And when we come back, the first issue is Kevin Wada.
Mm-hmm.
And Kevin Wada doesn't do sequentials, as everybody knows.
Yeah.
I was sort of thinking about how, okay, I want Kevin to do an entire issue, and Kevin loves WicDiv, so give it up for it. What can I do? And I had the bright idea of doing a magazine issue.
Oh my god.
So basically the whole thing is interviews with, not just interviews, but primarily interviews with the gods.
Oh
and
my god.
All the photo shoots are Kevin Wada's art, and he's doing the whole thing will be designed like a magazine. It's all written in universe. And that'll be 32 pages of that, because there's like a 3-month gap in the story.
Uh-huh.
So we kind of pick up like there is some Jamie art in as well, but it's primarily Kevin. And we pick up January the 1st when the story picks up again. But yeah, there's a whole issue, so it's even more so. And I thought, okay, that idea isn't complicated enough. Then I realised I don't need to write them all. I basically ended up hitting up a number of my like journalists and critic people we know, like real world, like writing for newspapers and fancy names most people maybe have heard of.
Mm-hmm.
And I basically did a chat log with each of the journalists role playing out the interviewing the gods. So me live role playing Woden and Baal and Morrigan.
That is amazing.
And they've written up the transcript into a proper feature. And like the first 2 have come in, so and we've still got a couple more to do.
Uh-huh.
But the first 2 have come in, and they're just really like articles. It's wonderful. It's like this, the Baal interview especially is like, oh yeah, I could just imagine reading this in the Guardian. Baal seems like a real person, which is right. And it's so, and to the whole, you said earlier about experiments and that kind of thing.
Uh-huh.
That's what we can do that. We can throw an idea at the wall and go, okay, that's an interesting idea. Let's try it.
I have to ask, are you guys going to do like a Brubaker Phillips style magazine variant for it?
We've solicited it, so it won't be that. But we're thinking about maybe doing a limited edition for like Thought Bubble or something.
Oh, okay.
Like, yeah. As in, I don't, apparently shops hate it.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
I can see shops, that.
Yeah, but it would be interesting to try it.
I love them. They're so amazing.
Yeah, I bought it as well. I think they're beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
But still. Anyway, yeah, so that's our new thing.
Oh my god, thank you for sharing that. I'm really excited. I was really curious as to what it was going to be, because I knew Kevin, like you said, doesn't really do sequentials, and that is such a perfect marriage of creator with unique idea that I love it. It's amazing.
Yeah, it's like I really hope it's going to work. So it's actually the funny thing is I'm writing. I don't know. I'm going to give up the jokes now. It's still early, but it's all going to be alt universe stuff. So I'm the editor of the magazine,
mm-hmm.
except in the WicDiv universe, I'm a failed comic book writer. I put out Rue Britannia, and then just fell out. I fell back into journalism. So like I've been trapped there ever since. So I quite like that. In WicDiv, my life is considered to be less interesting.
Oh, that's amazing. Okay, well, thank you so much, and I'll make sure to link everyone to all the coming stuff. But I'm really excited to read it all.
Excellent. Thank you much for having me. It's been very fun ranting.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for listening to this week's episode of Off Panel with writer Kieron Gillen. You can find him on Twitter at Kieron Gillen, and his writing in The Wicked and Divine, Darth Vader, Modded, and Mercury Heat. Don't forget to like the show on Facebook at /sketched. That's SKTCHD. Follow it on Twitter at @sketchcomic, or follow me at @slicefriedgold. Want more from Off Panel? Subscribe on iTunes or Stitcher, and give the show a rating and review while you're at it. Also, my new comics adjacent newsletter called The Crossover just launched. Make sure to subscribe at bit.ly/The Crossover newsletter if you want more writing from me. A quick thanks to the band Wolfpack, whose excellent track Outro from their album Volmilch opens and closes the show now. Give them a listen, as they're totally rad. Thanks for listening, and tune in for a new episode next week.